Hello everyone and welcome to Jim's Tabletop Wargaming. Today I have with me the new Space Marines Assault Intercessors Paints Set from Games Workshop, very much aimed at those starting the hobby. I wanted to see what was available for those looking to get into Warhammer 40k and what the limitations of the box are. With this I can give a few suggestions as to what the steps I would take going forward from this set would be, but most importantly I can give you some insight into what's in the box. So price point for the box is £22.50. This will vary depending on territory that you're in, and you can actually pick this up for just under £20 from some retailers. So places like Element Games, Wayland Games and Fistful of Dice tend to offer this for just under £20. Considering the usual price for 12mm paint pots is around £2.75, and the Citadel brushes vary, with the cheapest being around about £3.85, I will say that the kit is a decent value, as normally with paints and brush included, you're looking at around about £20 price point, not including the models. As I say, that is rough, as they don't sell the brush separately, and you can't really buy some of the paint pots in a 12mm version, so that is just my best estimation on this one. As a Space Marine player, I regularly use 4 of the paints included. I've never used Astro Granite before, which I'm particularly looking forward to. I tend to use more traditional sand and gravel basing instead of technical or texture paints, so I haven't really looked at much of these, although I have picked up a couple recently, I just haven't used them yet. The included paints are MacLeod Blue, which will be good if you plan on painting Ultramarines or have a dark to medium blue colour scheme in mind. Balthazar's Gold, which is the gold I use for all of my gold trims and one of my most used colours. Corex White, again another good colour to have. Baden Black, this is my most used colour by far, as I prefer to use a lot of dark colour schemes, often priming with a black spray paint, and this comes in handy for those little touch-ups. Agrax Earthshade, or wash paint, and this is particularly good with the golds, as it's good to break them up a little bit, and anything that you need a brown wash for. Of course, the Astro Granite is also included here, which is a technical texture paint for basing and creates a rough surface on the base of the model, just to give it a little bit of a battlefield finish. The brush itself is labelled as a starter brush and is a decent size for the job, but you may struggle if you try and use it for anything other than just base coats and just the basic details. You would struggle to paint lenses on the eyes of the helmet, for instance, with this brush, and I found that I missed my shade brush when applying the washes. This brush tends not to have the same level of control in that department as a normal wash brush would have, as you tend to find that it will pool up in various places where you don't really want it to, and you don't really have that kind of control. You'll need to keep going back and drying off your brush and going back to reabsorb some of those details, whereas a more specified brush for that job will normally allow you to reabsorb a lot of that as you go along. Models themselves are quite a decent sculpt, with a nice dynamic pose for each of the models. Fewer mould lines to file down than some of the other marine kits. Some mould lines where panels join are a little bit thicker, so do bear that in mind. It's almost not noticeable, but if you look hard there are a few little places where it looks a little bit lumpier than it should be, or the edge of the panel doesn't quite end where it should. So just keep an eye out for those, they may need to be filed down. One thing you may also notice is the models come with the Ultramarines icon and squad insignia already sculpted on. This was something I was surprised at, is it doesn't really show you that too much in the product images for this. But the box does not come with any transfer sheets, so keep that in mind if you are planning on painting it as a different chapter. It is out of the box set up to be Ultramarines, and you will need to file the shoulder pads down if you did want to get rid of some of those details. You may note that it doesn't come with model clippers or snippers, and you will need these as well. There are a few different places you can get those from quite cheaply, and Games Workshop does offer a pack with a clipper and a mold line remover as well, so it's worth bearing that in mind. But I would definitely recommend both of those tools, as they'll come in handy if you're going to be doing quite a lot of these models. No glue required, they are push fit. So I painted this model unassembled. I did put it together just to show what it looks like before painting, but I was able to pry that back apart very carefully. You may find it easier to paint them apart or assembled, varying different preferences here, but I like to be able to get into all those little details, so I will tend to partially assemble and paint those individual bits that I might not be able to get behind or get around, just to keep some of that detail on there. You will need a water pot of some kind. Old jars work well, and just make sure they are clean and you don't mind ruining it with paint. I use the included plastic tray as a paint palette. You'll need a paper towel or an old rag or something that you can clean and dry your brushes on. Ideally not something that gives off too many fibres or little particulates. I find toilet paper is particularly bad for this, as it gives off very fine hairs and very fine fibres into the paint, which then goes onto your model. So you want to try and avoid that if you can. You can normally see it on the end of your brush if you rub it across it with some water on there and then check it. You'll often see there will be a few bits on the end. I will paint on top of a cutting board to protect the table beneath, but you could use newspaper, bits of card, anything that would achieve a similar effect. You just want to ensure that you don't ruin your painting space. Ensure you have good lighting to paint by. I tend to keep a lamp nearby to illuminate the side that I am looking at so I can see any parts that I've missed. I did shoot a painting tutorial for this, but unfortunately I ended up recording it entirely out of focus. So if this video does okay and people want me to, I will attempt a reshoot of that so I can use the remaining models as a bit of a painting guide. But if you do want that, let me know in the comments below, give me a like on this video and I'll see what I can do. So I have some still images here showing what I was able to actually achieve using only the brush and the paints that were included. So I mixed two grey colours, one for the edge highlights, one for highlighting on the base, just to break up some of that colour. And I did mix up a blue as well just to do the edges. These were just, as you can imagine, using black and white and blue and white. Did manage to get it pretty close to what I had in mind, which was lucky in the end, as it didn't look great when I started out, but by the time it finished it was quite striking. I really did start to appreciate the brushes that I commonly use though, as I would really recommend anyone starting out to get a few little extra brushes here or there. So for instance, detail brushes are particularly good, as this one's a little bit too big for some of the smaller ones. You might find you get a bit more control out of some smaller brushes, and also dry brushes as well, as this brush isn't great for that technique, so I would recommend getting a dedicated dry brush as well so that you don't ruin any normal brushes. So the brushes I particularly use as well are from Army Painter, so I use Detail, Insane Detail and Psycho. I also use their Hobby dry brush as well for doing a lot of the smaller models. For bigger models I tend to use more Citadel brushes for those. I also have a medium shade brush from Citadel which I use for all my shading, unless it's a very small area, in which case I will just use a normal brush because I'm normally not using a great deal of paint or wash in those cases. It's also worth investing, as I say, in mold line removers and clippers, as you'll probably need them just to get started with this kit. There are a few cheap options out there available, so keep an eye out for them. Go down to your friendly local game stores as well. Those hobby stores will often have a lot of these tools in there, cheaper than you might get from Games Workshop for instance, but it's entirely up to you which ones you use. Likewise, having the exact paints that you need rather than mixing them up each time is a lot easier than what I've done here, as mixing can be time consuming, and also you have the time stipulation of the paint drying on your palette and everything, so it's really worth investing in colours that you're going to be commonly using and trying to stick to those as best you can. I was actually quite happy with how this turned out, and I was quite surprised by the texture paint as well. I will quite happily recommend that texture paint as well as this painting kit in general, to be honest. It's a very nice starting point. I was quite surprised by it. The texture paint itself really did speed up the basing, as it skipped pretty much like 3 or 4 steps over the process, and you could get it done within, say, like, I think it was about half an hour to an hour drying time, compared to drying of PVA and then drying of various coats of paint. So this was actually quite a nice way of speeding it up. It hasn't completely replaced my old school method for me. I do prefer the old sand and gravel technique, because I could get a little bit more variation on there. But this paint does speed up the process, and I would say for anyone starting out, it's a good way to get a really nice finish really quickly, so I can't doubt it. Just slap a little bit of a shade wash on there, slap a little bit of a dry brush highlight on there, a couple of different color highlights on there, and then you've got a decent base. No messing around. So that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, if you do like it, give us a like, leave us a comment down below if you found it insightful or helpful in any way, and once again, thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.